7 ropes swayed beneath a cottonwood tree in the desert. Cole thought they were outlaws strung up as a warning, but as he got closer, his blood turned cold. They were 7 Apache girls, hanged and left to die. Then he heard it, the faint sound of breathing. They were still alive, and the men who did this were coming back. Tell me what you felt in this story. Leave a comment below. Type 1 if you liked it. And subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. A lone cottonwood tree stood in the middle of a sea of sand, and beneath its shade, 7 ropes swayed gently in the midday sun. At first, Cole thought they were the corpses of some outlaw gang, strung up as a warning. But as he drew closer, the sweat on his back turned ice cold. They were 7 Apache girls, hanged. Their necks were bound tight, feet dangling above the ground. Tiny scratch marks in the sand below showed how hard they'd fought against death. But what made Cole freeze wasn't the sight itself. It was the faint sound of breathing. He rushed forward, touching each girl's arm. There was still a flicker of life. All 7 were still alive, just unconscious from hanging too long. Cole cut the ropes one by one, pulling each girl down onto the scorching sand. A strong gust of wind knocked their limp bodies over like torn sacks. He laid them side by side, doing his best to keep their airways clear. Then suddenly, a trembling hand grabbed the front of his shirt. A hoarse, broken voice whispered, "Brackett, they're coming back." Cole lifted his head and looked around. The footprints were fresh. The ashes from the fire still smoldered. Wagon wheel tracks stretched out in a line, not yet erased by the wind. Brackett's gang hadn't gone far, and clearly, they had no idea the girls were still alive. In that moment, Cole knew he stood at a crossroads. He could walk away and pretend he'd seen nothing. Or he could save these 7 and throw himself into a war with a man who had all of Arizona under his heel. He exhaled hard and placed his hand on the grip of his revolver. The choice was as clear as day. "All right," Cole said softly. "I'm not letting anyone hang the innocent on this land." And from that moment on, the fate of 7 Apache warrior girls was bound to the fate of one white marshal who had just stumbled upon the gates of hell. Cole set up a makeshift tent under the shade of the cottonwood tree, shielding the 7 Apache girls from the blazing sun so they could breathe easier. He divided the last of his water into chipped wooden bowls, giving each of them a share while trying to stop the bleeding around their necks where the ropes had cut deep. One of the girls suddenly jolted upright like she'd just escaped a nightmare. She stared at Cole with wary eyes, her hands instinctively searching for a weapon. Though it was clear she had none left, Cole raised both hands. "Yeah, see, I'm not Brackett." That name made all 7 girls open their eyes at once, as if thunder had just called them awake. The oldest girl, the one Cole figured was the eldest sister, was the first to sit up. Her voice was rough but firm. "You cut the ropes. You saved us. But don't get too close." Cole sat a few steps away, leaving enough space for them to feel safe. "What happened? Who hanged you?" The entire tent fell into silence. Then finally, the eldest spoke. "Brackett didn't want to kill us. He wanted something far worse." Cole frowned. "Gold, silver ransom." She shook her head. "No, Brackett wants the hide map. The real one. The map every Apache has sworn to protect with their life." The other girls whispered in their own language, short and fast, filled with fear. Cole couldn't understand all of it, but the weight of it was clear. The eldest continued, "This map doesn't lead to gold. It's not the kind of treasure white men dream of. It marks every underground water source within hundreds of miles, and the locations of silver veins never claimed. Whoever owns it controls all of Arizona. Cole froze. Something like that wasn't just valuable. It was dangerous enough to start a war between tribes and miners alike. Her voice dropped, like a curse being spoken. Brackett caught someone from the tribe. He tortured him for the location of the map. That man never gave in, so we were taken instead. Cole asked, "So did you tell him?" The eldest looked him straight in the eyes without a moment's pause. "We would rather hang." The words landed like a cold blade in the air. Cole took a deep breath. "Then I need to get you somewhere safe before he comes back." But all seven shook their heads at once. Not with fear, not with hesitation. The eldest declared, "We're not going anywhere. We will find Brackett first." Cole slapped his thigh in frustration, furious at their recklessness. "You were nearly hanged to death, and now you want to chase down a gang big enough to be an army." She answered with a voice as cold as desert stone. "They're not a gang. They're the ones who killed our families." In that moment, Cole understood. These girls weren't victims. They were 7 Apache arrows waiting to strike at the heart of their enemy. Cole thought that after nearly being hanged to death, the most natural thing any human being would do was run. Heed they, or at the very least, beg for protection. But the 7 Apache girls in front of him were the exact opposite. They sat up one by one, slowly but steadily. They were still weak, but in their eyes there was no fear. No fragility, only something smoldering. Like embers at the bottom of a fire pit, Cole opened his water pouch and offered them careful sips. 7 dark eyes looked at him, wary but not hostile. The eldest, Shia, was the first to take the water. She drank exactly 3 mouthfuls and handed it back, even though her throat was clearly burning. "Why not finish it?" Cole asked. "You need water to stay alive." Shia answered, "Demons like Brackett can only be killed by the living." The words were so cruel and calm that Cole had no idea how to respond. The moment broke when Talin, one of the girls, suddenly dropped to her knees in the sand and touched a footprint near the tree. She leaned in, gave it a quick sniff, then signaled the others, "Maine, rally," and Uda immediately spread out, scanning the area as if they'd just woken from a nap. Not survived, a hanging. Cole watched, his mouth dry. "What are you doing?" Shia answered curtly. "Tracking." In this condition, Cole was stunned. Shia raised an eyebrow. "We've been in worse condition and survived." Then she pointed to a patch of ground west of the tree. Brackett left 3 men behind to cover the trail. They went toward Painted Gorge. Cole glanced around. He saw nothing, no clear footprints. But the 7 girls were reading the land like a story written in sand. Raleigh suddenly turned back and spoke in a voice sharp as an arrow. The one in the rear injured his right leg. Heavy step. "We'll catch them." Cole frowned. I never said I was letting you join the chase." Shia cut him off. "You can't hunt Brackett alone. He already hanged 7 of us. You think he'd hesitate to hang one more marshal?" The words were blunt, but the truth in them was thick enough to taste. Cole stood there for a few seconds, weighing right and wrong, life and death. In the end, he exhaled and tightened his grip on the revolver at his hip. "All right," he said. "If you've decided not to run, then I'm going with you." Shia turned to the others, raised her hand, and signaled, "Today, we hunt." And just minutes after escaping death by hanging, the 7 Apache girls were on their feet. tightening their laces, tying up their hair, and moving like shadows. No complaints, not a single weak breath. Cole watched them, these warrior women drifting past like the night wind before a storm, and for the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't leading them. He was following an army born to hunt. The trail leading out from the hanging ground cut straight through a field of jagged rocks, then disappeared behind a stretch of blood-red canyon walls. The 7 Apache warrior women moved in formation, each in her place. Cole brought up the rear, keeping watch, trying to understand how they read the world around them. Uda stopped first. She crouched low, touching a shallow hoofprint in the dirt. Without a word, she tilted her chin to the right. Shia translated for Cole. 3 men, 1 horse carrying 2. That horse is heavier than normal. Cole looked down. He could only see faint scuffs where the wind had blurred the sand. You can tell all that from this. Shia's voice was flat. Brackett doesn't do the interrogating himself. He brings someone else. Who? Cole asked. The answer didn't come from Shia. It came from Selena, standing a few paces away, reaching beneath a cactus to pick something up. She held it to the light, a small piece of metal, no larger than a finger, a badge fragment shaped like a star. Its edge had been ripped violently, torn from someone's shirt. A chill crept down Cole's spine. It was a piece of a sheriff's badge. A gust of wind whistled through the canyon, followed by a sharp whistle from Raleigh, her signal for danger. The group immediately melted into the shadows of the rocks, dropping low to observe. Below, on the canyon floor, deep wagon ruts cut through the soft earth, and right between those tracks was a boot print. Cole would never mistake. High-cut boots, steel-toed, nailed soles. Only 1 man in the entire region wore them. Sheriff Dorian, Hale of Red Mesa. Cole swallowed hard. Hale, he's involved in this. Shia didn't answer. She muttered something in Apache, low and cold, heavy enough to squeeze the air from the canyon. Marine stepped over and handed Cole a torn scrap of fabric. The smell of town tobacco clung to it, strong and unmistakable. A brand only Hale smoked. Talon's voice was clenched tight. He's not just involved. Shia looked at Cole, her eyes holding something deeper than hatred, something that could burn down a village. She said, Hale isn't Brackett's ally. He's his guide. Cole felt his stomach twist. Hale's a sheriff. His job is to protect the town. Shia's words cut through the air like blades. He's protecting himself. And the hide map, at any cost. Selena stepped beside Cole and pointed north. Brackett's not far ahead, but Hale is waiting at Painted Gorge. Cole looked at the other 6 girls, their eyes screaming silently, held back only by the iron discipline of warriors. Finally, Shia said the one thing Cole wasn't ready to hear. Sheriff Hale is our blood uncle. The words blood uncle hit Cole like a hammer to the chest. The air in the canyon grew thick. These 7 Apache girls weren't just chasing an enemy. They were hunting a man whose blood had once mixed with theirs, pressed into the palms of their hands when they were children. This hunt had become a reckoning. I truly appreciate you being here. If this story brought back something inside you, memories of dusty afternoons and hoofbeats echoing through your chest, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. So each day, we can sit down together, and I'll tell you another tale from the Old West. The wind howling through Painted Gorge sounded like voices moaning from the depths of the earth. Cole stood still, and the 7 Apache girls were so motionless they looked more like stone statues than living people. The name Dorian Hale had landed among them like an axe, splitting a tree rotten at its core. Cole looked at Shia. "Uncle, you mean blood uncle?" Shia didn't answer. She simply stepped to the nearest rock, sat down, and laced her fingers together, as if trying to hold on to a memory before it slipped away. The others gathered around her silently, forming a quiet circle. The air shifted heavy, cold, like the sun had been shut out. At last, Shia began to speak. Slow, steady, but each word carried the weight of the desert. "You asked why we don't run." She looked up. "Because we can't forget that night." Cole said nothing. He listened. 7 years ago, Hale was on the run from the patrols. He came to our village asking for shelter. Apache people don't turn away a traveler. We gave him water, corn cakes, a place to sleep. He smiled at us, taught us the white man's words. Shia gave a faint laugh, a sound with no warmth in it. That night, there was no moon, only the sound of hooves in the distance. We thought it was merchants passing through. But then, her voice dropped, like it was being pulled down by the hands of death. Brackett's gang came. No warning. They slashed, burned, strangled the children while our eyes were still adjusting to the smoke. Uda clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. Talon closed her eyes, her lips trembling. The first to fall was my mother. Shia said. Hale held her by the arm, demanding the map. She spat in his face. He ended her with his own hands. Cole felt his spine go numb. Another man held down my father. Brackett asked about the map. My father stayed silent. They threw him into the fire to make him talk. Selena whispered into the wind. We heard our father screaming until he couldn't scream anymore. Raleigh said, they hung the children, smashed the heads of the elders, tore open the sacred tents. Shia continued, each word, like the edge of a blade. 50 Apache people died in one night. Not because of war, because of the hide map. Cole felt his chest tighten. So how did you survive? Shia pointed to the canyon behind them. I pulled my 6 sisters into that crack when the fires broke out. I heard every scream of our people. I saw Hale standing beside Brackett, and I swore she looked at Cole, her eyes glowing like embers, still burning that one day. He would have to see us before he died. No one spoke, only the silence of the desert and the vow of 7 souls who'd had their family stolen from them. Cole gripped his revolver tighter. Now he understood. This hunt they were on wasn't to stop a gang of thieves. It was to end the curse, born on a night soaked in blood. The sky began to burn a copper-red hue as the 7 Apache warrior women, along with Cole, entered Devil's Gorge, a rugged canyon with walls as sheer as twin blades. This was a place even U.S. cavalry avoided, because if an ambush was set at the right spot, anyone down below was as good as dead. Shia stood at the entrance, her eyes scanning the sharp ledges above. Hale wants to lead us in here. Cole lowered his voice. You sure? Shia's gaze was cold. This is where he used to practice ambush tactics with my father. That sentence hit Cole like an arrow to the gut. Hale hadn't just betrayed them. He was using Apache tactics, the very ones he'd learned through family bonds to destroy his own blood. They stepped into the canyon. Just minutes in, Raleigh froze, raising a hand to halt the group. She picked up a small pebble, placed it on the flat of her knife, and let it drop gently. It bounced to the left instead of falling straight. Uda nodded. Someone's above us. Cole drew his revolver, pressing against the canyon wall. How many? Talon answered. At least 6, maybe 10. The wind howled through the gorge, a long, ghostly moan like the breath of a demon. Then the sound of metal clinking echoed from the cliffs above. Shia gripped the handle of her bone knife. They're about to fire. At that instant, a burst of gunfire cracked overhead. Bullets rained down like steel hail, kicking up sand and stone. Cole yanked Nohava down, just in time. A bullet grazed his shoulder, burning like fire. Move, Shia shouted. But they didn't scatter blindly. The 7 girls split off with precision, each darting toward a crevice or rock ledge they'd clearly marked earlier. Cole realized they'd seen the trap long before stepping into it. Selena climbed upward, her body pressed tight against the rock like a mountain cat. Uda threw a rock across the canyon wall, the echo confusing the ambushers. Raleigh slithered beneath the boulders, weaving through gaps like a desert snake. Cole fired back, barely aiming just enough to keep heads down. Then a scream from above. One of the ambushers fell, a blade driven through his chest. Talon appeared right behind him, her face smeared with red dust. Breathing hard, she'd scaled the cliff while bullets rained all around her. Raleigh yanked Cole to the left. This way. He ducked just in time, and a bullet slammed into the rock where his head had been a second before. Shia gave a short whistle. At once, the 7 warriors regrouped and launched a counterattack, not by climbing up, but by striking from below. Uda lit a bundle of dry grass and hurled it over the ledge. Black smoke surged upward, choking the shooters. Marine hurled a spear that caught a man clean, dragging him from his perch. Within minutes, the ambush fell apart. The survivors fled from the ridge like wolves driven from their den. Cole gasped for breath, sweat and blood mixing with the dust. They're not Brackett's men. Shia nodded. They're Hale's. Silence returned to the gorge. But this silence wasn't peace. It was the echo of a terrible truth. Hale knew they were coming. He knew they were alive. And he was waiting for them somewhere worse than this canyon. The ruins of the old church. Shia turned to Cole, her voice low. We've crossed into his territory. There's no turning back now. As the sun sank behind the stone ridges, the last light spilled across the sky, stained the color of blood. The 7 Apache warrior women and Cole Reddington reached the edge of a clearing where what was once a church built by the first settlers now stood in ruin. Only broken walls remained, a collapsed roof, and blackened wooden beams that looked like the bones of an old beast hollowed from within. Shia raised her hand to signal a stop. This is it. Hale is waiting inside. Cole looked around. There was only one way in. No back door. No path to retreat. Exactly as Hale had planned it, Talon stepped forward, inspecting the footprints near the ruins. At least 20 men. Heavy weapons. Raleigh sniffed the air, her brow furrowing. Fresh gunpowder. A lot of it. Cole's heart pounded hard. They just survived Devil's Gorge. But this trap, it was cleaner. Sharper. Like it had been designed by someone who knew exactly how the Apache survived and how to corner them. Cole looked at Shia. He wants you in there. Wants to end it tonight. Shia remained calm. So do they. Cole was about to reply when a voice rang out from the shadows. Reddington. Dorian Hale's voice. Cold as steel, dipped in snow. Lead them inside. A white man can't defy the law. I want them brought back to town to stand trial. Shia let out a laugh, sharp as a knife scraping across stone. Trial. He says, Trial. Cole stood between two worlds. On one side, the 7 warrior women he'd saved from the noose. On the other, the law he'd sworn to uphold his entire life. Hale's voice echoed louder across the ruins. Reddington, you represent the United States. You will hand them over, or be judged a traitor. The 7 girls turned to look at Cole. No pressure, just a look. They knew he had to decide for himself. Cole swallowed the tremble rising in his chest. For his entire career, he'd believed that justice and the law walked hand in hand. But standing in the shadow of a night where 50 lives were burned alive, he realized that had only ever been an illusion. Slowly, Cole unpinned the badge of a deputy U.S. Marshal from his shirt. The metal caught the red glow of sunset. He let it fall to the ground. The sound of metal on stone rang out like a verdict. Shia looked at him, saying nothing, but her eyes said enough. Cole drew his gun and stepped forward to stand beside the 7 warrior women. He spoke each word clearly. Your law is not justice. I choose Apache justice. From the darkness, Hale roared like a beast being cornered. Reddington, do you even know what you've done? Cole raised his revolver, his voice steady. I do. I chose to stand with the innocent. Immediately, the sound of guns being cocked echoed from behind the broken walls. Hale's men emerged from behind charred beams. They'd surrounded the church. Shia raised her hand to signal her 6 sisters. Just a small gesture. But Cole understood it instantly. Tonight, they would not run. They would not beg. They would not let evil live one more day. Shia turned to Cole, her voice low like an ancient vow. Tonight, we end Dorian Hale. In the darkness of the crumbled church, the wind blew through the charred beams. Cole stood among the 7 Apache warrior women, gun in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. From all directions came the sound of boots and the sharp clicks of cocked rifles. Hale's men, tightening the circle. Hale roared, fire, but no one pulled the trigger first. Shia had vanished from her spot like a shadow. Talon darted left, quick as an arrow. Selena crawled low to the ground like a desert fox, dodging cavalry fire. Raleigh leapt onto the broken rafters, moving nearly soundless. Marine and Uda split wide, each bringing death in a different direction. Half a second later, the dark exploded with screams. One man dropped from above, Raleigh's blade driven straight into him. Another went down under Talon's strike, bones cracking like crushed stone. Selena set a snare so fast, Cole barely caught it. 2 soldiers stumbled right into it, falling hard, their heads slamming into rock. Cole shot one, aiming at Shia from a distance. The bullet pierced the man's shoulder. It spun him backward and sent him crashing into a timber post. Unconscious, gunfire pounded the ruined roof like hail, but none of it hit. The men firing were shooting into shadows, and the Apache women had become the shadows. Hale had never imagined his enemies would be the living ghosts of a massacre. He shouted in panic, "Hold your ground. Don't let them get close." A sharp whoosh sliced the air. An arrow slammed into the dirt inches from Hale's boots. So precise, it stopped him cold. Hale froze. Then Shia stepped forward. No cover, no hiding behind stone. She walked straight into the center of the ruined church, firelight flickering across her face like an ancient statue come to life. Her 6 sisters stood behind her, forming a crescent line. Cole moved up beside them, gun lowered, but gaze colder than desert night. Hale drew his pistol, hand shaking. "I'm the law. I have the right to take them back for trial. Cole stepped forward, voice slow and clear. The law doesn't cover 50 murders. Hale shouted louder, raising his weapon. You're a marshal. You answer to me. Cole looked to Shia. Just a single nod. Then he spoke the line that would be remembered for decades. Make it quick. Shia pulled back her bowstring. Her hand did not tremble. Hale understood. He dropped his gun, fell to his knees in the dust of the old church. Then tunk, the arrow drove straight into him. Dorian Hale, the man who had burned an Apache village to the ground, fell in the very place where he'd once preached lies. Silence covered everything. Only the wind remained. When dawn rose, the dried blood on the ground had turned black. Cole reached into his pocket, pulling out the marshal's badge, his last tie to the old world. He placed it on a stone beside Hale's body. Said nothing. Shia stepped forward. She looked at him, not with the pain of a girl who had lost her parents, but with the gaze of a warrior who had seen a man stand beside them in the darkest hour. Cole said softly, "If you'll have me, I want to leave Arizona with you." Shia placed her hand on his chest, solemn like a sacred rite. The 6 sisters behind her stayed silent, but they all knew Cole had chosen this family, and this family had chosen him. The 7 Apache warrior women rode out from the ruined church with Cole Reddington. They left the badge, left the old world behind, and carried with them the hide map and a bond forged in blood. My friends, some roads are meant for walking, and some roads exist only to test how much light still lives in our hearts. Cole Reddington chose that light, even when it meant walking through blood, betrayal, and his own shadow. He was no longer a marshal, no longer bound by white man's law, but he kept the one thing that mattered most: the courage to stand for truth when everyone else bows. Sometimes the most honorable path isn't the easiest, but the one that refuses to lead us into darkness. It means the world to me that you're here. I truly hope that wherever you are, peace and happiness always find their way to you. I love you, my dear audience of Wild West storytelling. I've spent years studying the forgotten stories of the American frontier, the choices that defined survival, and the moments when ordinary people had to decide who they really were. This story reveals what happens when a man has to choose between the law he swore to uphold and the justice he knows is right. 5. Takeaway points. Point 1. Real strength isn't always loud. Shia drank exactly 3 mouthfuls of water and handed it back, even though her throat was burning. When Cole asked why she didn't finish it, she said, "Demons like Brackett can only be killed by the living." Minutes after surviving a hanging, she was already tracking the men who did it. Point 2. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who know exactly how to destroy you. Sheriff Hale had once lived with the Apache, learned their language, eaten at their table. Then he led Brackett's gang straight to their village and held Shia's mother by the arm while demanding the map. She spat in his face. He killed her with his own hands. Point 3. The hardest battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought in the moment. You have to choose which version of yourself you're going to be. Cole stood between the 7 Apache girls and the law he'd worn his entire life. Then he unpinned his marshal's badge, let it fall to the ground, and said, "Your law is not justice. I choose Apache justice." Point 4. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing, but sometimes they walk the same road. These 7 girls weren't chasing Brackett for gold or glory. They were hunting the man who burned their village, threw their father into a fire, and hung their people from trees. Shia told Cole, "We would rather hang than tell him where the map is." That's not rage. That's loyalty to the dead. Point 5. The most honorable choice is rarely the easiest one. Cole left his badge on a stone beside Hale's body and rode out with 7 Apache women into a world that would call him a traitor. He wasn't bound by white man's law anymore. But he'd kept the one thing that mattered: courage to stand for truth when everyone else bows.